Fresh off their little powwow in Washington yesterday, French President Emmanuel Macron just gave a subtle slap to Donald Trump. You know, a very French smackdown, classy and heavy all at the same time. Welcome to Occupy Democrats. I'm David Reddish. So, after spending last Friday in what I can only assume was a meeting of passionate and lusty bliss with Russian President Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump returned to Washington this week to meet with 8 key leaders of Europe. The subject, the fate of Ukraine and how to end the ongoing war there brought on by Russian invasion. Prior to Trump's meeting with Putin, he'd hoped to negotiate terms for a ceasefire. After the meeting, he saw things differently.
After hours behind closed doors, President Trump and Russian President Putin emerging from their summit on Ukraine, but with no deal.
There were many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal.
In their brief remarks, Trump saying progress was made, Putin alluding to an agreement, but the leaders providing no details and taking no questions. It capped an extraordinary event not seen in more than a decade, Putin touching down on American soil, walking the red carpet as Trump waited to greet him. A hearty handshake, the warmth between the two leaders on full display. Earlier in the day, Trump had made clear he wanted a ceasefire.
I want to see a ceasefire rapidly. I don't know if it's going to be today, but I'm not going to be happy if it's not today.
And if a ceasefire wasn't reached, Trump had warned Russia would face severe economic consequences. But this morning, after that 3-hour sit-down with Putin, Trump now says the best way forward is to work towards a peace agreement without a ceasefire first, adopting Russia's long-held position.
Yeah. If that little clip made you uncomfortable, you're not alone. Wait until you see what President Macron has to say. Stay with me. And by the way, you know why suddenly abandoning the idea of a ceasefire is a bad thing? Long-lasting peace may be the long-term goal, but without a ceasefire, until those terms are agreed upon, the fighting will continue. This only reinforces the theory that Putin wants the war to continue to weaken Ukraine as much as possible and then push to annex the entire country. That's what he has said he wants all along, and that's what he told Trump earlier this year. So no wonder the leaders of Europe were not happy with Trump yesterday. For more on that meeting, see our other videos here on the channel, though for the sake of this story, you need to know that during their talks, French President Macron looked like he was ready to punch the man.
And I think you'll see that President Putin really would like to do something else. I think when we set that up, when we do, I think it's going to be when, not if.
Please excuse President Macron. I'm told that anyone sitting that close to Trump gets the urge to deck him. And before you say that's an out-of-context clip, that we're reading too much into it, you should know what Macron said subsequent to the meeting yesterday. Last night, after the proceedings, he sat down with NBC News to share his thoughts on how things went and on Trump's sudden interest in a peace agreement over a ceasefire. Now, this is a longer clip, so make sure to watch the whole thing. Take a look.
President Trump was overheard on a microphone talking to you, and he said, quote, "I think he wants to make a deal," meaning Putin. "I think he wants to make a deal for me." You understand that? As crazy as it sounds. What went through your head when he said that to you?
I think if, at the end of the day, if we have a deal which is compliant with this long-standing and robust peace, this is a great news. And your president, indeed, is very confident about the capacity he has to get this deal done, which is a good news for all of us and can break this, I would say, this daily killings, which are the responsibility of the Russian aggressor. So I think it's a great news. My point, and this is why we've worked so hard during the past few months, and we need this convergence, is to be sure that this deal is not detrimental to Ukraine and Europe. And all of us, we want a deal and we want a peace deal. But we want to make sure that this peace, and so this deal, will be something which will allow the Ukrainians to recover the country and live in peace, to be sure the day after this peace deal that they will have sufficient deterrence power not to be attacked again, and to be sure for the Europeans that they will live in peace and security. So this is the nature of the peace, which will be now the core of our work. But I think this is a great news, and indeed your president is very confident about its capacity to get this deal done with President Putin, and it's great.
Let's talk about the issues. You were very firm. You still think a ceasefire is necessary. President Trump, on his way to Alaska, said that he wanted there to be a ceasefire agreement. Otherwise, he said there would be very severe consequences. Do you think a ceasefire is still possible?
I do hope. Let's call it once again truce or ceasefire, but we have to stop the killings. First, for humanitarian reasons. Second, because if we want sincere, reasonable, comprehensive talks in order to build a peace, you cannot organize this discussion, in the middle of the bombs. Look, today we were with President Zelensky. President Trump called President Putin at the end of our meeting, and we meet again right after this call. In the meantime, the Russian army organized a series of strikes on civilians in Ukraine. So it's impossible for an Ukrainian president and Ukrainian officials to have talks about peace as their country is being destroyed and as their civilians are being killed.
So, to paraphrase President Macron there, Trump has no idea what he's doing, and the leaders of Europe are developing their own plan. Trump sees the Ukrainian conflict as a fight over territory between Ukraine and Russia. He doesn't understand that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is more than just a skirmish over territory. It's about Putin trying to reestablish a Russian empire and taking over other nations in Europe. And if you know European history, you know that Tsar Alexander famously got to Paris. So you can understand why Macron would be nervous, not to mention the people of Germany, Sweden, Finland, Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and a dozen other nations that Russia has historically tried to conquer. Trump fails to grasp the gravity of letting the bear out of its cage. It will gobble up everything around it if we allow it to. So thank goodness for more sensible leaders like Macron, Chancellor Merz of Germany, Prime Minister Starmer of the UK, and NATO Secretary Rutte. They're not just fighting for the safety of Ukraine. They're fighting for the safety of Europe and, yes, the United States too. We'll keep you updated on the situation in Ukraine and the negotiations around it as they continue to evolve. This is Occupy Democrats.